Hey everybody, so today we're going to be talking about completing the square. Now, if you're like me and you remember completing square from algebra, at least for me, for a long time, this was like a very mysterious and kind of scary process. But once I understood it and practiced it, it actually makes a lot of sense and is really, really awesome and important. So what is completing the square? Completing the square is an algebraic process. So completing the square is an algebraic process for taking a quadratic function in standard form and putting it into vertex form. Okay, so when we're completing the square, I want you to keep this in mind. Our main goal is to take something that looks like this and turn it into this. Okay, and what we're essentially doing is forcing this side over here to become a perfect square in some way, okay, so that we can factor really easily. Now, the process I'm going to show you might change. This might be different from what you remember or what you learned before, but I promise you the steps I'm going to do will get to the same thing as any other process that you may have seen in the past. Okay? So let's take this example and let's complete the square. So let f of x be 2x squared plus 16x plus 10. So my first step in completing the square is, I'm going to write this. This isn't pinkies up, but we're going to get a 1 in front of the x squared. Okay, and what this is doing is it's giving us the a that you see in vertex form there. That's really what this step is trying to do. Okay, so we're going to take 2x squared plus 16x plus 10. Okay, and so to get a 1 in front of the x squared, what we're going to do is we're going to factor, and now this is where my process might differ from what you've seen before. I'm going to factor a 2 from these first two terms here. Okay, so I've factored out a 2, again, from these first two terms here. You could factor it out from all three terms, but there's a little bit more arithmetic at the end that I'm trying to save us from. But in any case, I'm taking out a 2 from these first two terms. And our goal now is to convert this into, let's go back up to vertex form, into this piece right here. So we want to make this quantity that we have here a perfect square. So step 2, we take the b term and we do two things to it. We divide by 2 and then square. Okay, so what's our b term? Our b term now is 8. So I'm going to take that 8, we divide it by 2, and then we square it. So this is going to give us 4 squared, which is 16. Now I'm going to highlight this, and you're going to see, I want you guys to notice something. We're going to see some magic in a second. All right, 3. Okay, we add and subtract the number in step 2 next to the b term. Okay, and we do it in that order. We're going to add, whoops, I forgot a d there. We add and subtract in that order the number that we got in step 2 and put it into the b term. Okay, I'm going to actually need a little bit more room, so I'm going to take this off for a second. See if I remember that when we do it later. All right, so we had 16 in step 2, so we're going to take 2x squared plus 8x, and then now we're going to insert plus 16 minus 16, right next to that b term. Now this might seem very, very mysterious to you. This is plus 10. But what this is doing, the whole point of this is these first 3 terms are now a perfect square. They factor into, in fact, so I'm going to put step 4 here, factor the first 3 terms. these first three terms now, x squared plus 8x plus 16, this factors into, I'm going to use big brackets here, x plus 4 squared. And again, I'm going to highlight that 4. What's 4 mean to us? Remember, 4 was that number that we got here in step 2. Okay, so that dividing by 2 number there will actually appear again in our equation. Okay, now let's continue. So we still have this minus 16. Nothing happened to that. We didn't factor that. That stays there. Okay. And then plus 10 on the outside. And then lastly, the last step in completing the square is distribute the 2 and simplify. Distribute, well, I should say distribute the quote-unquote a term. Actually, instead of term, I'm going to call it number, a number, and simplify. Okay, so we're going to distribute this 2. So we get 2x plus 4 squared minus 32 plus 10. Let's combine like terms. And boom, there's our vertex form right there. 2 times x plus 4 squared minus 22. Okay. Now this process works for any type of standard form quadratic function you have. Some may be easier than others, but in any case, that's a good process for it. Now let's see this process with another example, something that has a little bit more spice to it. And hopefully I remembered this correctly. X squared plus 5x minus 7. Okay, so let's complete the square on this quadratic function here. Okay, so step 1, remember we want to get a 1 in front of the x squared. I don't have to do anything because it's already a 1 here, so I'm just going to keep it as x squared plus 5x. And then I'm just going to insert some parentheses for myself here. Okay, so step 1 actually was given to us for free. Now step 2, remember, we take the b term, I'm going to do this on the side, we divide it by 2 and square it. Now unfortunately for us though, 5 over 2 is not a whole number, so I'm just going to leave it as 5 over 2, and then if we square that, we get 25 over 4. Okay, but I still do want to keep in mind this 5 over 2. We'll see it again. Okay, so what did we do with this term? Our next step, we add and subtract this next to our b term. And again, remember it is in this order, plus minus. Otherwise, our factoring is going to get crazy. And again, these first 3 terms factor into, although it's a little bit harder to factor that because we have a fraction there, but this does factor into x, and you can check this on your own, x plus 5 over 2 squared. And then we have minus 25 over 4 here. And minus 7. Okay. And then now we just simplify. We don't have to distribute the a term because the a is 1 here, but we want to simplify now. We can release these brackets. And then combine like terms. Okay, so I'm going to do this on the side. Minus 25 over 4 minus 7 is minus 25 over 4 minus, so I have to get common the same denominator. So that is 28 over 4. Minus 25 minus 28 is minus 57, I believe. Sounds good to me. Boom. Okay. And then now we're looking at there's our vertex form. We completed the square. If you guys are doing the square, what I recommend, take your time with each step. Notice in this case, since we didn't have something that divided evenly, we do have fractions appearing, so be very, very careful with that. But if you follow that process, you should be good to go.